All right.
Okay, I think we're good
Looks
to
like
go.
we're up and running. We're okay, Andy?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. And so we are now on the record. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. This is a remote meeting of the Energy Facilities Siting Board. My name is Beth Card, and I am the Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the Chair of the Energy Facilities Siting Board. With me today are the other members of the Siting Board, including Matthew Nelson, Chair of the Department of Public Utilities, Robert Hayden, Commissioner of the Department of Public Utilities, Patrick Woodcock, Commissioner of the Department of Energy Resources, Jonathan Costco, General Counsel and Designee for the Secretary of the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, Stephanie Cooper, Deputy Commissioner and Designee for the Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, Brian Casey, Public Member, and Crystal Johnson, Public Member. Additionally, Andy Green, Director of the Siting Board, will be serving as a meeting host along with other staff of the Siting Board. Before we begin, I will provide some important information about how we will be conducting this meeting. The Siting Board meeting today, being held today, is done so using remotely, using Zoom, which is being recorded and will be available on the Department of Public Utilities YouTube channel. This meeting is being conducted remotely pursuant to the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law, the Siting Board's regulations, and recent legislation allowing the continuation of remote open meetings via video conferencing until April 1st, 2023. The purpose of today's board meeting is to listen to comments from participants in the Siting Board proceeding, from public officials, area residents, and other stakeholders joining us on Zoom or by phone. After listening to your comments, the board will begin its deliberations on the tentative decision, consider possible amendments to the tentative decision, and finally vote on the tentative decision. Using Zoom, you have an opportunity to see and hear everything said during this remote Siting Board meeting and to offer your comments. For those of you participating by phone, you also will hear everything and have an opportunity to comment as well. The instructions on how to participate were provided in the notice sent to parties and mailed to all property owners and mailbox addresses within 300 feet of the proposed project route. In addition, the Siting Board staff sent the notice to elected officials in the area of the project. The notice was also posted on the EFSB website and the Eversource website and published in local newspapers. If you are having any difficulties in participating, please call or text 857-200-0065. That's 857-200-0065 for assistance at any time. In conducting the meeting, I do want to note some important procedures that we will be following. All board members must be audible to each other and the audience. If a board member becomes disconnected at any time, we will note that on the record. If there are significant technical difficulties, I will stop the meeting to allow the problem to be resolved. Before we get to the substance of our meeting, let me mention that a stenographer is participating remotely who will transcribe everything said to make an official record of the meeting. Board members and other speakers should mute their audio when listening and unmute when speaking. Everyone should speak slowly and clearly and allow the prior speaker to finish before you begin speaking. These procedures will help ensure an accurate transcript of the meeting and proper translation of the discussion. First, if you would like to present comments to the Siting Board today, you have hopefully pre-registered as described in the notice. If you would like to speak but have not pre-registered, we will do our best to accommodate you at the appropriate time by using the raise hand icon in Zoom at the bottom of your screen. For those of you who are dialing in, you can raise your hand, so to speak, and let us know you would like to comment by dialing *9. Public commenters are asked to keep comments to approximately 3 minutes per person so that we can hear from everyone who wishes to speak. We will gently remind speakers when it's time to wrap up about 30 seconds before the 3-minute mark, and then again at 3 minutes. Each public commenter will be provided only one opportunity to comment so that we may hear from everyone who wishes to speak today. Public officials who comment will have additional time as needed, and the siting board staff will listen to comments from public officials and the community. Then the board will listen to presentations from its staff and parties in the proceeding. Finally, we will begin deliberations, consider amendments, and vote on the tentative decision as amended. We will take comments in the following order. First, from federal, state, and local public officials. Then we will turn to comments from members of the public, and I will call on public commenters in the order that they have pre-registered. Lastly, time permitting, I will invite additional public commenters who use the raised hand feature on Zoom or *9 on your phone. Next, after a presentation by the siting board's presiding officer, we will turn to commenters from the petitioner, Eversource Energy, and then from interveners. We are now ready to begin the substantive portion of the meeting. There is one item on the agenda this afternoon, consideration of the tentative decision in the matter of NStar Electric Company doing business as Eversource Energy, EFSB 19-06, DPU 119-142-19-143, in which Eversource Energy seeks approval from the siting board to construct a new 115 kV overhead transmission line through the towns of Bourne, Sandwich, and Barnstable, Massachusetts. I would like to thank everyone for attending this meeting today. As I noted, the stenographer here will be transcribing the meeting. So again, please speak loudly and clearly to ensure that we have an accurate record. So we're going to start, as I indicated, with comments by public officials and the public. So we'll start with elected and appointed officials. And so let me first see if we have any federal officials who have joined us here today. So I look to the team if we have any federal officials joining us.
We didn't get any pre-registered speakers, but if there are any officials, please raise your hand in the attendees.
Not seeing or hearing any, right, Wayne? Okay. Then we will next seek whether there are any state officials who wish to speak.
I don't see any, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, we will see if there are any local officials, mayors, boards of select people or city councilors or others from local government who wish to speak.
Nobody at the moment.
Okay, thank you. We will now proceed to see if we have any members of the public who would like to speak at this time. So I will look to the team to help identify if there are members of the public who have signed up to speak, and we'll start with those who have pre-registered first.
Thank you. We had a Thomas Mortland that signed up, but I don't see Thomas Mortland in the attendees. If you are Thomas Mortland under a different name, please raise your hand. If not, we'll have to circle back if he comes on. Nobody has their hand raised.
Okay. All right. So at this point, we don't have anyone who is pre-registered aside from Mr. Mortland, who we don't see, and we don't have any other commenters who are identifying themselves from the public at this point. I just want to pause and make sure we're giving ample time for anyone to identify themselves. All right. Seeing and hearing
if you
none.
would like to comment,
okay, go ahead.
Please raise your hand. Nobody's raised their hand as of right now.
Okay. Thank you, Wayne. All right, well then at this point, we will move to our next portion of the agenda where we will seek comments and feedback from the EFSB, from the parties and limited participants. So I would ask to start, I would ask Presiding Officer Donna Sharkey to please present the tentative decision. Go ahead, Ms. Sharkey.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Secretary Card and members of the Siting Board. My name is Donna Sharkey. I'm the presiding officer in this matter, and I am here to present staff's tentative decision and the proposed amendment sheet and answer any questions you may have regarding this proceeding. We are here today before you to address Eversource Energy's petitions to construct, operate, and maintain an approximately 12.5-mile overhead 115 kilovolt electric transmission line in the towns of Bourne, Sandwich, and Barnstable, Massachusetts. We refer to this project in this line in the tentative decision as the new line. The new line will be constructed in an existing Eversource right-of-way, which extends between Eversource's Bourne switching station and the West Barnstable substation. The Bourne switching station and West Barnstable substation will require related equipment modifications, and the existing western fence line at the West Barnstable substation will be extended by approximately 65 feet for those modifications. The new line, together with the relation station modifications, are referred to as the Mid-Cape Reliability Project. The company also seeks individual and comprehensive zoning exemptions from the Barnstable zoning ordinance to complete the proposed modifications to the West Barnstable substation. The tentative decision recommends approval with conditions for Eversource's Mid-Cape Reliability Project. As part of a 2016 needs assessment study for the southeastern Massachusetts, Rhode Island area, which was then updated in 2020, the ISO New England reviewed and approved the project as a new 115 kV line to address reliability needs on Cape Cod. The project addresses numerous threats to continuing reliable service in the Cape Cod sub-area, an area comprising 22 towns with over 200,000 customers and over 500 megawatts of peak load. In the event of peak summer load conditions and potential system contingencies, such as the loss of an existing transmission line, the loss of a substation transformer, or the loss of a major generating unit, electric service to Cape Cod area customers is at risk of interruption due to thermal overloads and voltage problems on the transmission and distribution system. The project addresses numerous threats to continuing reliable service in the Cape Cod sub-area, an area comprising 22 towns with over 200,000 customers and over 500 megawatts of peak load. Eversource performed additional studies with updated data that confirmed identified threats to reliable service in the Cape Cod area and the need for the project. ISO New England also determined that the project is needed for the Vineyard Wind offshore wind project to be able to provide full unrestricted output at all hours of operation. Eversource also requested that the siting board approve the project as a 345 kilovolt capable line to facilitate the eventual interconnection of the Park City Wind offshore wind project, known as the noticed variation. The noticed variation would follow the same right-of-way as the project, but use slightly taller structures with some modifications on the placement of these structures within the existing right-of-way. In March 2022, Park City Wind entered into an agreement with Eversource to compensate Eversource for all incremental costs to make the project a 345 kV capable line. The notice variation would operate at 115 kilovolt voltage until such time as Eversource proposes additional modifications to the Bourne switching station and the West Barnstable substation, subject to future review and approval of the siting board and the department. We received 2 petitions to intervene in this proceeding from Park City Wind and Mayflower Wind. Both interveners expressed support for this project as an important opportunity to promote interconnection to the regional grid for offshore wind projects located in the waters of Cape Cod. Eversource conducted an extensive routing analysis and presented a comparison of the primary route on the existing right-of-way and a noticed alternative route using right-of-way and in-street construction on the basis of cost, constructability, and environmental impacts. The tentative decision finds the primary route would have comparable environmental impacts to the noticed alternative route, but cost significantly less. Consequently, the tentative decision finds the primary route would be superior in providing a reliable energy supply with a minimum impact on the environment at the lowest possible cost. In addition, the tentative decision finds the environmental impact of the projects would be minimized and mitigated. Given comparable environmental impacts and the cost-sharing agreement with Park City Wind, the tentative decision finds the construction of the project as a 345 capable line will be consistent with current health, environmental protection, and resource use and development policies adopted by the Commonwealth. The Global Warming Solutions Act obligates administrative agencies to consider reasonably foreseeable climate change impacts and related effects when reviewing permit requests. General Laws, Chapter 30, Sections 61 and 62 were amended by the Roadmap Act to include consideration of environmental justice principles in reviews of proposed projects, including opportunities for meaningful participation and consideration of energy and environmental benefits and environmental burdens. Pursuant to these laws, the Siting Board finds the notice variation would provide an initial step in the eventual construction of a 345 kilovolt line on the primary route, improving the reliability of the transmission and distribution system once constructed, as well as providing a launching point for further expansion deemed necessary on a regional basis in the future. With regard to increasing use of renewable energy resources by improving the reliability of the regional transmission system, the project will help facilitate the integration of renewable energy. The Siting Board also agrees with the company's assessment that the improvements to the transmission system in the Cape Cod load pocket will strengthen and improve the reliability and enable a more efficient and flexible operation of the grid, consistent with the goals of the Green Communities Act, the Clean Energy Act, and the Roadmap Act. Finally, the tentative decision recommends the Siting Board grant the requested individual and comprehensive zoning exemption from the Barnstable zoning ordinance to complete modifications to the West Barnstable substation. Those exemptions are required for the project, and the proposed use of the land or structures is reasonably necessary for the convenience and welfare of the public. The tentative decision concludes that the Mid-Cape Reliability Project, as proposed, will provide a reliable energy supply with a minimum impact on the environment at the lowest possible cost, is necessary, serves the public convenience, and is consistent with the public interest. You should have received a copy of the amendment sheet developed by the staff, which includes clarifications and minor modifications of the tentative decision, but does not include changes to the determinations presented in the tentative decision. Minor typographical edits were not included on the amendment sheet. I would be happy to answer any questions now or later in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sharkey. Does the board have any questions at this time? Mr. Casey, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chair Card. Ms. Sharkey, do we know how the allocation of the incremental cost from the 115 to 345 was allocated to the interveners? Was it based on ampacity of total ampacity? How was it allocated?
The allocation of the incremental costs associated with making the line 345 kV capable is being picked up strictly by Park City Wind. That's consistent with the transmission support agreement that was reached this year between the company and Park City Wind, was approved by FERC, and will be in effect so that the ratepayers are essentially protected from the additional costs that might be associated with the 345 kV capable expenses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodcock.
Thank you. Just so I understand the needs assessment, there's been obviously a lot of activity with offshore wind in this area. And obviously there've been some developments, as we know, on load forecasting, and I appreciate that there were updated analysis conducted. I'm looking at page 16 with Eversource's updated analysis in 2019, and that included updated SELT forecast as well as additional assumptions on solar and EE developments. I just wanted to understand the implication of, there have been a lot of developments of offshore wind proposals for the area, if that was taken into consideration in the load forecast.
I would say that to the development of offshore wind projects were considered primarily in the form of the, well, I still probably call it the Vineyard Wind 1 project. And the ability of that project to contribute to providing capacity to the area was considered as part of the 2020 ISO New England assessment. But with regard to basically the need for the 115 kV upgrade to be done to support local needs for address both thermal overloads and voltage issues. Those have been problematic for several years over the course of the study in terms of providing reliable power to the local distribution system. And those were projected to continue through, I believe, 2029. So the base project would need to be constructed to address those. And the base project provided an opportunity, if you will, to review the potential need for additional transmission capacity as the offshore projects come online.
It's sort of interesting, the history of this project of looking at needs assessment and then looking at upgrades to effectively, if I understand this, to export it further into out of STEMA and into load pockets. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, given the proximity of the wind projects to Cape Cod, it really makes it perhaps the preferred site to interconnect to the regional grid at the potentially lowest possible cost. Although there are new sites that are being developed and considered as along the coast. At the moment, the ISO is still developing. It's done, I believe, 2 cluster studies, which have, the second of which has not yet been finalized, to address kind of how best to interconnect a variety of other offshore wind projects to Massachusetts and the New England transmission system.
Thank you. I had one other area of question on the timing of 115 to 345, but I'll pause to see if there are any other panelists that want to raise a question.
Thanks, Commissioner. Anybody else? I'm not seeing any other hands. I think you're okay to keep going and we'll come back to the group.
So,
yeah, go for it.
So this is how I understand the process. We are making a determination that this is the upgrade is necessary to 115 for a local needs assessment. And furthermore, there is an agreement to expand to a 345, which we are approving. And we will be informed if the company is pursuing that 180 days before construction. Do I have that correct?
The amendment sheet actually changes the 180 back to 120, which I believe is what the company may have originally proposed. But I just want to be clear that in terms of what we're approving now, basically we're approving putting taller transmission supports along the existing right-of-way to make the line potentially 345 kV capable, but the ability to provide full 345 capability will be dependent on a future filing that the company has to make, and which will involve, among other things, changes that they'll have to incorporate at the Bourne switching station and the West Barnstable substation.
And will that require further EFSB deliberation?
Yes, we believe so.
Okay. Is there any sense of timing of when there will be a determination of whether this project will be a 345 or 115?
I believe that partially the timing of when that second filing might come in from the company would depend on what, the timing of when they'd be able to do construction to further accomplish the 345 capability. The plans now are basically to do the construction with the taller transmission supports, and there's about a 10-month construction period estimated to get that work done.
I guess what I'm driving at is and I'm not an engineer and not involved in the construction business, but if there was the ability to move forward with a 345 now with one construction project versus a 115 and then further upgrade for a 345 and have an EFSB, it would be helpful to know kind of the timing. And I would assume there's some efficiencies if we knew if this project was moving forward with a 345 right now.
So if I could just jump in on this point, Ms. Sharkey, Commissioner Woodcock, I think the company's intention, if I recall the record correctly, and this may be a point that we want to hear from the company directly, but I think this is kind of a no regrets construction approach in the sense that what would actually be energized for the line would potentially be 345 kV. So we might skip over the 115 kV operation of the line for efficiency benefits and avoiding any expenditures that were unnecessary for the ultimate operation as a 345 kV line. And this depends, of course, on when the company puts together the actual request for the additional substation and switching station modifications that would facilitate actual 345 kV operation. But we won't need to revisit the construction of the transmission structures and line itself because they will be fully capable of carrying 345 kV voltage. So if the company were prepared to come in rather quickly with the 345 kV modifications at the substation, and the issues before the board were hopefully rather, easily adjudicated, we might very well have a decision in the near future, and the line might be commissioned initially as a 345 kV line. But I would like to offer the company the chance to clarify if I've misstated.
Would you like me to address that now, or as I offer formal comments to the board? I'd be happy to do so now.
Yeah,
I,
and maybe,
I think it would be fine if, oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Casey, do you want to say something first?
yeah, just on top of Commissioner Woodcock and Mr. Green, just before the proponent responds, just so that he has everything out there. I think I understand from an infrastructure standpoint, they're going to size the towers and the conductors for a 345 system. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, so my only concern is buyer's regret. Like, let's say they build it, I want to make sure the ratepayers don't get stuck with that incremental build, right? That's really where my last question. Thank you.
And the transmission support agreement that was executed between the company and Park City Wind, that is now final and approved by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, specifically provides that Park City Wind is obligated to pay that incremental cost, even if the project is canceled or never generates any power. So they are on the hook, and the ratepayers are protected by that agreement.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosenzweig, please go ahead. Thank you.
Sure, and I will just address the question that's presented to me and then wait for my formal turn to offer other comments.
Sounds good.
So there are a few questions that came from the board, and I want to do my best to address them. And if I miss anybody's question, please to redirect me to respond to a particular matter. As it relates to this project, there are two separate needs. There's the system reliability need for our customers to make sure that we have a reliable service to meet their peak load demands under contingency conditions. And those were very aptly described by Presiding Officer Sharkey. That portion of the project is to serve sort of native load on the Cape, customer load. And we've already seen peak load levels that are above what even ISO projected, as the tentative decision notes that we experienced a peak load in 2019 of 623 megawatts, as opposed to the low 500 megawatt level that was forecast by ISO New England. So we're already at the point for the reliability purpose that this project is desperately needed in the short term. And we expect the cost for that reliability need will be regionalized once we apply for cost recovery from ISO New England. The second need that this project is intended to address is the prospect, which is more than a prospect right now, of offshore wind needing to connect to the Eversource grid on the Cape, to the regional grid to serve the needs of those project developers, as well as to provide renewable energy and achieve the state's climate change goals. Park City Wind is a separate project before you now, and you will, I assume, in due course, see a tentative decision regarding their project and their transmission upgrades from offshore to onshore, where they would connect eventually to the Eversource system to affect that regional interconnection. As it relates to the notice variation that's being proposed by the company and proposed in the tentative decision for approval, that allows us to build this project at a 345 kV specification with poles and conductors that would support a voltage of 345 kV, based on ISO New England studies that have already concluded that a 345 interconnection level of capacity and voltage is necessary to support Park City Wind interconnection with the Eversource system. So what the company did was put in a proposal that would save money to the offshore wind industry, in this case, Park City Wind, by simply taking two construction projects and two construction cycles and creating an efficiency by constructing it in one cycle at an incremental cost of about $13 million. Those dollars will be paid for by Park City Wind and not directly by ratepayers. That's already been determined by ISO New England. It also shortens the construction period and lessens the impacts to abutters in the community by doing this in only one construction cycle as it relates to the line. There are other facilities that Eversource needs to build to affect the 345 kV interconnection. There are upgrades at the Bourne end for a 345 kV station that needs to be built. And there's a further expansion that will be proposed for the West Barnstable substation to accommodate the interconnection with Park City Wind. Those will be presented separately in applications to the siting board. Our expectation is to be able to make those filings with the siting board in the first quarter of 2023, as soon as possible, frankly. And we hope to be able to get in before the siting board with those project change filings and any associated zoning relief that may be necessary within the next couple of months. So I think that's the overall picture. I don't know if I answered all the questions that the board had, but that's the basic framework.
Thank you for that. I'll look to Commissioner Woodcock and Mr. Casey if if you need any additional information.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Ditto.
Great. Thank you for that. Do members of the board have any further questions on the presentation on the tentative decision? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So before, I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, please go ahead.
Thank you. I was just a little bit slow. I just have a quick question. Understand that the majority of the work is happening within the existing, right away. And also familiarize myself with the documents where it does talk about there are still in construction activities anticipated to be, some, adverse impacts to some flora and fauna, but that there are exclusion zones, particularly, I believe, in row 342, and that there were some references to ways to help minimize where it talked about contractor training, restricted work zones, and then clear sweeps for turtles. And my question is regarding the clear sweeps for turtles, who's conducting that? Because I just wanted to ensure, is it the contractors, but who's doing it so it's done accurately, effectively, and who's trained for that?
I guess I might defer to Mr. Rosenzweig on that particular question, but that would be among the things that are considered, for example, by through MEPA, in terms of looking at the measures that were required, the company was required to undertake in order to preserve habitat for protected species. The company was directed to undertake certain measures, although I'm going to defer to Mr. Rosenzweig because my detailed knowledge of those specific measures is relatively limited, and he's probably better positioned to address those.
Yeah, if it would be helpful, Ms. Johnson, ultimately it's the company's responsibility to comply with permit requirements and to make sure that its contractors comply with whatever permit restrictions and standards that are in effect relative to a project. We will have a contractor that will have to become familiar with all the elements of our permits and all the restrictions. The project's been through the MEPA review and has received a certificate from the secretary as it relates to the MEPA side of the project. There are restrictions, as you mentioned, as it relates to how things will be constructed and where. There will be an environmental monitor that will be present at all times to oversee and observe, monitor construction. and it will be a daily activity at the tailgate, so to speak, of the contractor to make sure what's coming up on construction and to ensure that they follow the parameters that are in effect relative to construction in the area that they are engaging in building and excavating and so forth as they're out in the field. I hope that's helpful.
It is. It does help clarify. Just to repeat back, there's an environmental monitor, and I understand MIPA's position on it. However, from my experience, there can still be a gap between who's doing the sweep for these turtles and who's trained versus if it's in use of environmental monitor, there can still be gaps. I'm just trying to minimize any adverse impacts. Understand the need of the project, want to go ahead, but also want to be sensitive to the habitat and just trying to close up any gaps as possible just to make it thorough. And I'm sure the company would appreciate not being left to be like, wow, how do we actually have to provide something for a contractor and such? So wanting to make it as foolproof as possible. So is there a way then to say for that sweeping that it's done with the environmental monitor, they qualify for such, or that a qualified party is there to ensure it's done? Not to say that a construction person does not have that sensitive eye, but it may be better for them to not have to be burdened with that responsibility if there is somebody who does specialize in habitat identification, tracking, ski, everything. So is there a way to help the company do excel with that a little bit rather than have the burden?
This is a fairly commonplace requirement that is that exists for a lot of companies' construction or its projects in rights of way.
It's still missed. I know I used to work in engineering, and so I understand that.
So
yet it still was not always done fully.
Well, I think the company's record is very good, but the facts will dictate whether that's in fact true. We will choose a contractor that has experience and specialists in this area.
That'd be wonderful. If that could be noted that they do have that experience versus not, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That's a concern. That's something I'll be looking for.
Excellent.
Great.
Great, thank you. Are there further questions? All right, not seeing any. Before we begin with comments by the parties, I do want to note that the Siting Board did receive timely written comments on the tentative decision from both Eversource and Mr. Thomas Mortland. The comments have been posted on the Siting Board's electronic file room online, and all comments that were received by the close of business yesterday were sent to Siting Board members. Before we turn to the applicant for their comments, I just want to circle back one more time to make sure that Mr. Mortland has not joined us since he had pre-registered for the public comment portion.
I do not see him in the attendees, but if anyone is here as Mr. Mortland, please raise your hand in the attendees list.
I know, Wayne, that he had said in his comments that he intended to participate by phone, and his phone number was included in the comments. And I don't see that, his phone number, much less his name in the attendees group.
Okay, thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure we didn't accidentally miss anyone who expressed interest in speaking. But presuming he's not here, as folks are checking, we will now turn to Eversource for their comments on the tentative decision. I note that Eversource is represented in this matter by attorneys David Rosenzweig and Michael Kaler. And so I would ask if counsel for the company wish to make any comments on the tentative decision.
Yes, thank you. We do. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Siting Board members and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is David Rosenzweig, and with me is Mike Kaler, as you mentioned, and we are appearing on behalf of Eversource Energy. At the outset, we want to thank the staff for their hard work throughout the process. The staff's tentative decision is a thorough and well-reasoned evaluation of the evidence based on siting board standards and precedent. We greatly appreciate their efforts. My comments will be brief. We strongly support the tentative decision and its recommended approval of the project with the noticed variation. As we said in our written comments, based on the comprehensive record developed in the proceeding, the tentative decision thoroughly addresses each aspect of the board's statutory mandate with factual findings that are appropriate and well supported. In particular, the company fully supports the tentative decision's approval of the project using the noticed variation. It is clear that the notice variation will not only serve both the imminent reliability needs of customers on Cape Cod, but it is also vitally important as a piece of infrastructure to interconnect offshore wind, which is in turn essential for the Commonwealth to achieve its aggressive greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. We also support the staff's proposed amendments to the tentative decision, particularly with respect to the terms of condition D. As we stated in our comments, Eversource is actively advancing its plans to facilitate the interconnection of Park City Wind to the Eversource system and the regional transmission grid. The existing schedule and related contractual obligations require prompt construction of the upgrades necessary for that purpose. The company believes that the 120-day timeframe strikes the right balance between allowing sufficient time for the siting board to review and to facilitate the expeditious interconnection of offshore wind, given its critical role in meeting the state's clean energy and climate change initiatives. With that, I will close, but I surely am available to address any questions you may have. We respectfully request that the board adopt the tentative decision, including the staff's proposed amendments, as the final decision in the matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Do members of the board have questions? Not seeing any hands. Okay. I think we'll look now to the interveners in the proceeding. There were two interveners in the proceeding, and I would ask if they would like to present comments to the board. I will. So thank you to the team from Eversource for your participation. We'll move to interveners. We'll start with Park City Wind. Park City Wind has been represented by Adam Kahn and Zachary Gerson. And so I would ask if counsel for Park City Wind wishes to present comments on the tentative decision at this time.
We do not wish to present comments. We strongly support the decision, but we have nothing to add to what's been said today.
Thank you, Mr. Kahn, for that. And does the board have any questions for Park City Wind and their interest? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. I'll now turn to Mayflower Wind. Mayflower Wind Energy has been represented by Eric Runge, and so I'll ask if there are any comments from Mayflower.
Yes, good afternoon. I think our only comment is that we strongly support the noticed variation approval here. We think it's good forward thinking on the part of the siting board to approve the right sizing of transmission infrastructure. I think this will be increasingly important to meet the public policy needs of the Commonwealth, and we support it here, but also in other proceedings in the future. And I think that's it.
Thank you for that. Just checking if board members have any questions at this point.
Secretary, if you would indulge me, just this is a fast moving terrain on reconductoring and expanding the transmission line. My understanding, this may be best for Mr. Rosenzweig, but my understanding is there has been some support regionally through NEPOOL to support regionalizing the costs of reconductoring some, and this is in the last year. And just so I understand this situation here, sounds as though some of these agreements may have, first of all, that's my understanding. Are you familiar with those discussions?
I am, and there's continuing discussions, and I wouldn't say there's unanimity and a clear policy or rate-making directive from whether it's NEPL or ISO New England, but it's a matter of intense focus at this point.
Okay. I just wanted to see how that intersects with this situation, but it sounds as though these agreements were done prior to maybe an evolving regionalization cost allocation of those upgrades. Is that
That's a fair statement, and I do believe for the Park City Wind project, where there was already a system impact study conducted by ISO New England, and the queue position had been approved, and upgrades were deemed to be necessary to support that. For the benefit of that project moving forward, and I think for Park City Wind's own interest, it was appropriate for the parties to come to their own resolution as to how costs would be incurred and collected from Park City Wind, and not wait for the resolution of uncertainty, as if you will, with regard to future policy on rate-making issues.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for indulging me on the discussion.
Of course. Thanks, Commissioner. Any further questions from members of the board? All right, I will note that there were no limited participants in the proceeding, so we will now move to deliberations. And so in order to begin deliberations, we will need a main motion before us. And so we'll start with a motion and a second on adoption of the tentative decision. And then we'll proceed from there with discussion. So I will start with, do we have a board member who wishes to make a motion to adopt the tentative decision?
I'll motion to adopt the tentative decision.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Now that we will leave that main motion on the floor for further discussion and can deliberate on the tentative decision. The first thing that we will do here is consider amendments to the tentative decision by staff, and then we will consider any additional amendments from board members. So what I'd like to do is focus on the staff amendments. So I would ask if there is, and Joan will tell me if I am not doing this right, but I will ask if there is a motion to amend the tentative decision to include the proposed amendments included on the staff's proposed amendment sheet.
I'll make a motion to adopt the staff amendments as listed.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Stephanie Cooper seconded.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any discussion on the proposed staff amendments? Not seeing any. Not seeing any feedback on the or discussion on the staff amendments. So I think where we are now is we will seek a roll call vote for the board on the amendments on the staff amendment sheet. Mr. Green, do you want to call the roll, please?
1 point of order, Chair.
Thank you. Yes.
No, I just want to check. I know board member Johnson was asking the company to memorialize something related to the engineering qualifications, and I just wanted to see if we felt that matter was settled or if we need to memorialize that through an amendment in some way.
Well, can I just ask yes, you can, Ms. Johnson. I just want to ask a procedural question first. Would we take that up in the staff amendments or in the more broad deliberation?
I would suggest that the board vote on the staff amendments as listed in that list and then move on to any other amendments requested by board members.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second on the staff amendments. Not hearing any discussion on the staff amendments. And so I think we are ready for a roll call vote on the staff amendments.
And I will proceed. Chair Nelson.
Aye.
Alan, you're on
Just a
mute.
moment. I'm sorry, but my Zoom feed was frozen and now it has just come back on.
Where
Do you
did we
know
lose you?
where did we lose you? Yeah.
Mr. Nelson was saying, I just wanted to check. I know Board Member Johnson was asking the company to memorialize something related to the engineering qualifications.
Okay.
I think I
go
spoke
ahead, Jen.
next, and I'll just repeat it, Alan, that I had suggested that the board first vote on the staff amendment sheet and then take up any additional amendments by board members separately.
And then I noted that we have a motion and a second on the staff amendments and that there's not been any further discussion on the staff amendments. And so now we will proceed with the roll call vote.
Chair Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hayden.
Aye.
Commissioner Woodcock.
Aye.
General Counsel Costco.
Yes.
Deputy Commissioner Cooper.
Aye.
Mr. Casey.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
And Chair Card.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you. So now we will continue with our deliberations, and if there are further or additional amendments that the board would like to propose, we'll take those one at a time and do individual roll call votes on any amendments that are put forth on the tentative decision above and beyond the staff amendments that we just voted on. So want to see if the board has further deliberations or other amendments that they seek on the tentative decision.
I will follow up if it's okay now. Thank you so much, Matthew, for bringing up the question that you did. My only thought was, for clarity purposes, is that the current document reads, Eversource stated that it would further mitigate the potential for project construction to impact state listed species negatively by implementing measures including contractor training, restricted work zones, and clearing sweeps for turtles prior to start of work, etc. And I value then the company had shared that they usually work with people who are experienced. So I think I was just confused with the language said, including contractor training, versus if they're going to be utilizing a contractor that has experience and expertise in such. And I want to close that gap. So if there can be amendment to clarify that, what we could say, including experienced or contractors, with, and we can identify experience versus, or someone to clarify what it means by contractor training in relation to the clearing sweeps. That's just my request was, can we have somebody who doesn't need the training per se?
May I note, just for the record, we're talking about the analysis and findings on page 60 of the tentative decision. Is the language that Ms. Johnson is referencing.
I think it's on, let me double check. Here we go. Mine says, wait 1 second.
Page 58 and 59 talk about what Eversource committed to. Page 60 is where we make our findings.
Yep, I just moved it. I was looking before, but let me go back down to 60. I was reading it initially from page 58.
It kind of repeats the same sentiment in the few pages.
I
Joan,
see
you're
that
on
Mr. Oh, I'm sorry. Chair Nelson, were you going to say something?
nope, just Miss Evans was on mute. And
I'm
I
sorry.
wanted to let
Thank
her know
you.
that she was responding.
May I propose some language is to see if this satisfies Ms. Johnson's concern?
Please.
Please, thank you.
Sure. So I would propose to add it into the analysis and findings section where we make our findings. I would propose to add it on page 60. And there's a sentence that starts, the company would prior to construction, that sentence there. It's about 7 lines down on page 60.
In the first paragraph? Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Here, let me propose that the sentence reads as follows, and this would be my, if this satisfies your request, Ms. Johnson. The company would, prior to construction, demarcate exclusion zones for state-listed plant species and implement other measures such as ensuring contractor qualification and training to minimize and further mitigate the risks of construction period impacts to rare species habitats.
That does help. It still has the word training, which to me leans towards they may not have that experience or expertise. And I know that Eversource had shared that they usually they do have a great track record. They work with people who have this experience. So not sure if we need to have training versus they would just use qualified or experienced contractors.
So we could say such as ensuring contractors are qualified to minimize and further mitigate.
Yes, and I know then brings in that we didn't define to minimize and further mitigate. So they qualify for that should be great. That should be good.
So that would be the addition. We need to do a motion and a second to add in the language after other measures such as ensuring contractors are qualified to minimize and mitigate. That would be how that sentence would read.
So Ms. Johnson, would you like to make a motion consistent with what Ms. Evans has just stated?
Yes, I was just thinking for a second about that. Yes, I'd like to make that motion for an amendment.
I will second that motion.
Any further discussion on this motion? All right, so hearing none, we can take a roll call on this amendment, correct? All right, Mr. Green, would you call the roll, please?
Chair Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Hayden,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodcock,
Yes.
General Counsel Costco,
Yes.
Deputy Commissioner Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Casey,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
and Chair Card.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for that conversation. Are there other items that the board would like to discuss in terms of potential amendments or other issues to deliberate on regarding the tentative decision? Seeing and hearing none, but don't want to give folks a minute to think. All right, hearing none and seeing none, I think our next point of action is to hear a motion and a second on the entire decision with the amendments that have been adopted, both the staff amendments and the specific amendment that we just voted on. So I would seek a motion on the entire tentative decision?
I would move
Motion. Go ahead.
move to accept the tentative decision as amended.
I second that motion.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I think we will proceed to a roll call vote. Mr. Green, please.
Sorry, Chair Nelson,
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Hayden,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodcock,
Yes.
General Counsel Costco,
Yes.
Deputy Commissioner Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Casey,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Chair Card.
Yes,
And that motion carries unanimously.
thank you. I thank the board for your work today. Before we move to adjournment, are there any other matters that we need to discuss?
Just one.
Please.
This may be our last board meeting of the year, so just from the staff's perspective, I really want to thank all of our board members, some of whom have served for quite a few years. And I don't know when our next meeting will be and who will be on the screen, but I want to thank everybody for, again, service to the board, the public, and for fulfilling our very important mission together. I appreciate it. And so does everybody that we work with.
Thank
Well,
you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Green. And I will say, probably being the shortest time member of the board, I too appreciate very much the work of the staff and all that you do to support the board in its process. And so thank you all for that, and to want to thank board members for your service and thoughtful deliberations and conversations in these proceedings. And so certainly want to wish everyone a healthy and happy new year, which feels like it's rapidly approaching. So thank you all for that. So I think now we are ready for a motion to adjourn. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
I second that motion.
I'm gonna assume no discussion, but and I'm seeing and hearing none. I think we can proceed to a roll call vote, please.
Chair Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hayden,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodcock,
Aye.
General Counsel Costco,
Yes.
Deputy Commissioner Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Casey,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
and Chair Card.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Thank you. We are adjourned and off the record. Happy holidays, everybody.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone.
Thank you so much.